As soon as we learn to observe as babies, we realize that the world is full of colors. The sky is blue, the grass is green, the clouds are white, and so on. Most of the times, the very first interaction which we have with any object is seeing it. And one of the first things which we see about an object is its color. But have you ever thought, why do we have all these colors in the world? Or is it a strange question for you? But only if you'll think harder, you'll realize that it's stranger that we have any colors at all. Growing up, we also realized that you can only see the color of a lot of objects when the room has light. But when the room is dark, all of them appear black or colorless. Now, in the school, we later learned that none of those objects have their own color. It's just how they react with the light present in the room defines what color we see on them. Here is a quick refresher for those who have been out of touch. Light is a combination of electromagnetic waves of different wavelengths where each represents a color. If this light falls on an object, the object reflects waves of some frequencies while absorbs the rest. The reflected wave then reaches the eye and we see the color corresponding to its frequency. And that is why if there's no light in the room, there's nothing to reflect and the room is dark. Our brains have created a simplified model around this process, which says that every object has its inherent color and it's only visible when there is enough white light. When the light is not white, it may appear in a different color. For example, the blue bottle on my table will appear black in red light. And then I'll say that the bottle does not show its true color in red light. But is blue its true color? The bottle is not inherently blue. It just absorbs every light frequency except blue. So when in the red light there's no blue frequency to reflect, it'll appear black. Now you may argue that since the bottle is exclusively reflecting the blue frequency, you may call blue as its true color. But wait, it's only true when you're talking about the visible spectrum. The bottle could be interacting with the invisible spectrum too. The human eyes are incapable of seeing those interactions, but they are as real. There are a lot of animal species which have been reported to have vision outside of the visible spectrum of the humans. So no, blue is not the true color of this bottle. But do you really need to think about all that? Maybe not always. Turns out that most of the time we can get away by believing that every object has its inherent color. And apart from this, our brains create many more simple models to explain how things are happening around us. Now, these models might not be accurate, but they do explain things well. And sometimes these models also influence the kind of questions we ask. We'll see later how. The next question we should ask here is, if light is nothing but a bunch of waves at different frequencies, how are these frequencies getting translated to specific colors? Why do we see red for longer wavelengths and blue for shorter wavelengths? To explain that in simple words, our eyes have millions of special photoreceptors called cones. And they are of three types, each one for sensing a band in the color spectrum. Now, depending on the light's wavelength reflected from the object, only the corresponding cone's sensor send the signal to the brain about its detection. The brain then combines the information from each type of receptor to give rise to different perceptions of different wavelengths of light. After the brain is done interpreting the image, we see it in front of our eyes. But how does brain show us anything? We are using our eyes to receive signals from the surrounding and send them back to the brain. The brain creates an image out of it, and after that, does it puts the image back in front of our eyes? Actually, this whole confusion is because of another mental model which states that we see through our eyes. The world is out there in front of us and we're using our eyes to see everything. But now we know that that's not accurate. We should note that receiving the signals from the outside world and seeing the images created by our brain are two independent things. And we all can see with our eyes closed when we dream while sleeping. Not just while sleeping, when we are awake and we close our eyes, we see different patterns. That's because even when we close our eyes, our visual system does not shut down, and the retina continues to send whatever smallest of signals it received due to maybe inherent electrical charges or mechanical pressure to the visual system. The point is that eyes closed or open, the visual system doesn't care. It will continue to generate images with whatever signals it receives. And since during our awake hours, most of the times, the images which our brain generates are due to the signals we receive from surrounding world and our eyes are open, we associate seeing to open eyes. Okay, so since eyes are out of the picture now, where do we see all the images? Turns out that the best answer to this question known to us right now is that we see everything in our brain. And not just that, every experience we have of the surrounding world is because our sensory organs are sending these electrical signals back to the brain, and the brain is analyzing and processing that data to create an interpretation of the surrounding world for us. And only then we see a bottle or taste an apple or hear a water wave or smell a flower. So now we can also say that the colors are not real, and it's just a concept created by our brain to differentiate between different wavelengths of light. And in fact, evolutionary biologists also suggest that humans develop this color vision to facilitate identification of ripe fruits, which would be a great advantage in that competitive natural world. And if human could just see in black and white, they would not be able to make distinction between red and green apple. And isn't it crazy to realize that whatever we see around ourselves is not the real world but just an interpretation of it done by our brain? And why does brain associate certain wavelength with certain color remains a mystery. And it is also unclear if every brain creates the same mapping. So your red could be different than my red and we would never know. What one sees in a color is something which cannot be described in words. And even if I try to describe my red to you, it's gonna be based on the cultural context, and that's why it's gonna be true for your red as well. So, all we know is that all of us have three types of photoreceptors which are sensitive to the same window and the visible spectrum. And of course, people with color blindness and supervision are the exceptions. And we also know that lots of animals have their photoreceptors which are sensitive to completely new band in the invisible spectrum. For example, the birds and insects can see in UV spectrum, and which explains why some of the flowers have attractive features only visible in UV spectrum so that they can attract pollinating insects onto them. The point here is that with our limited vision, our brain is creating this worldview of our surrounding, and we know for sure that there is a lot more happening around us which we can't sense. And that is why, no matter how much we try, we are always going to be constrained by our own senses, by our brain, in understanding the objective reality of the world we live in.